Nick in Massachusetts. Come on, system, let's go. Yep, Nick in Massachusetts. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, man. Wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about. Well, first, I want to just for all the like coronavirus deniers or whatever, you guys can head over to korkinlab.org/Wuhan. Korkin is like KORKIN lab. It's a lab at WPI, like Worcester Polytech Institute. I went there and I went there for about medical engineering, but yeah, this is a lab that's basically providing like free, like public research data on this virus, and so like you can see the data firsthand, and you can see that it's not like bullshit or anything. It's not made up.
Cool. Thanks for plugging that source.
And also, there's a guy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with George Hotz. He's a software engineer that works. He has this company called Comma.ai, and it's basically vehicle automation machine learning company. And he's doing on his free time. He's basically live streaming on Twitch, just like Matt is right now. I'm in this stream chat actually. Hey Matt. But yeah, George Hotz, this guy, he's basically on his free time, he's trying to reverse engineer the virus, live streaming on Twitch, his programming, and he's using this WPI data. So if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, definitely recommend checking that out.
Cool. Well, thanks for giving us all those. Yeah, not nice, cool plugs there that people can check out, Nick. But I want to know, what's the real reason you're calling here today? What do you want to talk about?
I'm calling because I'm like pretty atheist, but I think it's more reasonable. I think there's more evidence for deism than not. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting take. I'd love to hear why you think that.
So the qualification that I would make in the situation is that there's definitely not this isn't a position on a god per se.
Okay.
I guess I would have to distinguish a universe creator person or group of people and a god. The way I would distinguish would be the omnipotent sort of type of powers, including omniscience and omnipresence sort of thing.
Okay. So you believe that there could be a god or gods, but they aren't omni? Am I following you right?
Well, I don't think it's anything it wouldn't there's no evidence for anything that's supernatural, so that's not so it's not, it doesn't abide by mathematically coherent principles like physics.
Okay. So let's try to get to the heart of the claim here. What is the specific claim that you're making? Are you making the claim that there is a god, or that there are gods, or that there's a creator? What's the heart of it?
I would say the have you heard of the simulation hypothesis by Nick Bostrom?
Yes, we've talked about the simulation hypothesis on this show several times.
Okay. And so what's your so it's basically it's very I guess my position is pretty tied to that.
Okay.
To these assumptions. He has, do you guys disagree with his third proposition, which is the fraction of all people with our kind of experiences that are living in a simulation is very close to 1?
I don't entirely know what that means. I'll be honest with you.
Okay. So I'll kind of take it back a little bit.
Okay.
We have more physically coherent, mathematically coherent simulations created by intelligence, then examples of such things that arise spontaneously, if you exclude from the equation this universe and this reality.
Okay, I think that's a little more clear, but there's still some things I'm unclear about. Can I maybe take this in a different direction that might maybe make it a bit more accessible for people? Let's just talk about the simulation hypothesis as a whole. You know, what is it about the simulation hypothesis that leads you to the conclusion that, I'm assuming, well, I don't know what your percentage is on what you think there is of a god or gods, but like, you know, how much does that chunk of information, that hypothesis, influence your belief? Is that like, is that the main thing that informs you that there is a creator?
Wait, is there anything about this hypothesis that informs me?
Yeah. So in other words, Nick, outside of this hypothesis, are there other things that lead you to the conclusion that you have to a creator, or is the hypothesis your biggest reason for believing?
Well, it's kind of actually what I was just talking about, with sort of like there being more, even though like video games, we would toss that aside as evidence. Maybe, I don't know if you would consider video games as evidence. Yeah. But
I don't really. You know, people brought this up, and I'll just address this real quick, Nick. I don't see how the fact that we can create simulations means that we're in a simulation. Like, I agree. Yeah. Like, it brings up the possibility, but I don't really get farther than that. You know, it's also possible we could all have been created by extraterrestrial life. Like, yeah, there's a logic that goes there that makes that physically maybe feasible in some form or fashion. Right.
That's why I qualify my position in the sense that, like, I don't, like, I sort of, like, for example, I also believe that, like, if you were to ask me if it's more likely that we have one, like, this universe has one creator versus multiple creators working on, worked on the simulation collectively, I would obviously side with the latter, because most of our examples of, like, cyber physical simulations that we as a humanity have created so far, most of them have been created collectively. So I'm just kind of using us and the examples that we've created as a society as, like, a basis for this opinion.
Yeah, like, I agree with you. Like, yeah, we've definitely made some simulations. So, you know, we can scale that up to saying, oh, because there are simulations, you know, it's possible that we're in a simulation. I totally get that. But unless there's something about the simulation hypothesis I don't know, which there could be, I'm not sure of any empirical evidence that specifically demonstrates, yes, what we see here the best explanation can only be that we're living in a simulation. I haven't seen anything like that as of yet, which is why I withheld my belief that, yeah, we're living in a simulation, because, again, I haven't seen anything that directly demonstrates that. You know, there might be a philosophical argument for that. And again, I haven't looked too much into this, but the thing about philosophical arguments is, at the end of the day, if you have empirical evidence, that trumps a philosophical argument pretty much every time. Philosophy and schools of thought and philosophy have made rapid changes, especially in the 20th century, if we're even going to just go from there. But just throughout, as long as philosophy has been, some of the most ancient philosophers we can look at had pretty interesting and sometimes silly beliefs that we wouldn't necessarily follow today. And so a philosophical argument on its own, you know, there's credibility there, but it's not necessarily enough to convince me of something, especially of as big of a claim as, yeah, we're all living in a simulation. Like, to me, that's huge. It's going to require a lot of evidence for me.
Right. For sure.
So,
yeah, like, so, like, for example, I have, like, sort of, if you listen to Nick Bostrom talk to Lex Friedman, are you familiar with Lex Friedman at all?
I can't say that I am.
So he's an AI sort of like PhD, also teacher, I think, at MIT. And so like Lex Friedman is, and he does a bunch of his YouTube channel is like a bunch of interviews with world-renowned physicists, scientists, mathematicians, and he loves getting into the nitty-gritty about the actual their specialization, their research, and he likes to tie that stuff into like more philosophical sides of conversation, like the nature of the reality and what brings them meaning and that kind of stuff, and subjective type of stuff. It's really interesting. And so just to kind of like tie this back into our conversation, he had a conversation with Nick Bostrom about his simulation hypothesis. So definitely recommend checking it out. So, and taking from that conversation, I think one thing that I would sort of predict for the future, I think we might see these things in our lifetimes, at least like inklings of these kinds of things. But I would say that if we can create like high capacity, if we can manufacture high capacity quantum computers that the main problem with our current ones is that
Nick, I hate to interrupt you, but we got to wrap things up here. I got some other calls we got to take here, and I just want to hear your final thoughts, and then let's go ahead and try to wrap things up if you don't mind.
Yeah, I guess high capacity like quantum computers would be able to we would be able to use them in order to basically prove to ourselves whether or not we can actually create like sentience, because I mean that's probably one of the more complex things. Like molecular dynamics is not too complex, but sentience might probably requires a little bit more more refined understanding of physics in general. So if we can emulate sentience to a very high degree with quantum computers, and I think the only way would be with quantum computers, by the way. So supercomputing is like a linear computing, so you wouldn't. That's not. It's linear computation, whereas quantum systems are. If we can do that, I think we would get to a place. We would get to a place where we build evidence for the case that this is a simulation, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If it has to take quantum computing to give us evidence for that, that's really interesting. And yeah, you'd be right. The hypothesis would have to, take its time to become a full-fledged, reality to us, if that's true. Quantum computing is really interesting. I've read some stuff about it. Definitely don't know enough to make any definitive statements on it, but that's cool that you brought it up. And I would encourage you to think about, if it's really going to take that to give us the empirical evidence we need, how sure can we be in having that belief right now? Because if we know the standards of the evidence and we don't yet have that evidence, it would be hard for me to say either way whether a belief like that is true. But Nick, I'm going to go ahead and let you go here. Thanks again for calling, and appreciate you talking to us on this special home edition of Truth Wanted. That was a lot of information there, right, Sarah?
That was a little hard to keep up with, to be honest.
Yes, I agree. I think if Nick wrote his thoughts down and maybe had a conversation about it, it'd be great. I've had several conversations about simulation hypothesis on this show, and none of them have been particularly great, because the philosophy behind it is pretty dense, and it's very technical. There's a lot of technical arguments that go into that. And just a topic like that just isn't a great topic of conversation for a format like this. The medium of this isn't really super developed for that. Also, again, I don't have the right philosophical or physics or computer science qualifications to make an expert opinion. I can only go from what I know and the tools that I have to work with. So
it is interesting though.
Yeah, we're going to keep going with this show a little bit, folks. We're going to try to go until about 9 o'clock. I know we usually go until around 8:30 our time, but we got a couple other callers, and we want to keep talking to you guys, and I'm having fun. I think Sarah's having fun.
Having fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. So we'll get to the rest of these, I think 3 calls here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And then you can come talk to us on Discord. It's going to take a sec because we're going to log into our personal accounts, but I'm going to be there and Sarah's going to be there. So definitely come check us out in the after show if you can. So anyway, let's go ahead and go to our next caller.